Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. If you're following along, we're on Chapter 5, page 71 of White Fragility. The good/bad binary. He's not a racist. He's a really nice guy. This chapter explores what is perhaps the most effective adaptation of racism in recent history. The good/bad binary. Prior to the Civil Rights Movement, it was socially acceptable for white people to openly proclaim their belief in racial superiority. Actually, no, depending where you were, depending on which group you were in, depending on the mindset of the people you were around. It's not always the case that racial superiority of white people was expounded by everybody. In the Constitutional Convention, there was arguments that Africans should be African Americans at that point, because they've been there for years, hundreds of years, stating that they should be made free with full rights of citizenship. And there were people making that argument immediately. It was the Southerners, and not all the Southerners, by the way, who were making the case that basically that they were supposed to be slaves because they were subhuman. But it was not everybody that believed that. But again, why do we have to care about facts? Because we could just tell a story. But when white Northerners saw the violence black people, including women and children, endured during the civil rights protests, they were appalled. Wow. That's what she believes created the fact that white people saw black people being hurt, and then they finally, their hearts were touched, and therefore they said that's enough. I think what's going on here is projecting what's going on today with what happened then. It's just not true. There's no historical accuracy to this. This is just made up projections that's not even historical accuracy. The image became the archetypes of racists. After the Civil Rights Movement, to be a good moral person and to be complicit with racism became mutually exclusive. By the way, she earlier in the book talks about how the Ku Klux Klan changed their messaging because they saw that being a racist was not a good thing. And guess what? Because they themselves saw it wasn't a good thing. Although it's really strange that she mentioned that, because there are Klan members today that still maintain this insanity. You could not be a good person and participate in racism. Only bad people are racists. I would not call racists bad people. I would call them ignorant people. There are a lot of people with a lot of prejudice out there. Black, white, Hispanic. I don't care what country you're from. They're people that are prejudiced. I don't call them bad people. I call them ignorant people. There's a very big difference. I'll remember one client in particular many years ago who was a very strong member in the Nation of Islam. And he very much believed a lot of what he was told about white people. And he was very racist against white people. But me not dealing hate with hate, but just to understand his position, I was able to get him to talk to me about it, and we were able to talk about these things. He actually opened up and shared a lot. And I was able to help him understand different ideas and different discussions. Did I change him from being anti-hating white people? No. But he definitely was less, and he was able to hear certain points. And who knows, maybe afterwards or years later, maybe it would have an effect. And I think that's a much better way of looking at racism. It's the Daryl Davis idea of dealing with racists, not the Robin DiAngelo. These images of black persecution in the South during the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s also allowed Northern whites to position racists as always Southern. Also untrue. There's Northern white racists. There are Southern non-white racists. Okay? Not everybody in the South is a racist. Broad brushing the South as all being racist and the North all being non-racist is factually also incorrect. Even during the time of the Constitutional Convention, there were Southern senators and politicians that argued against slavery. And there were Northern ones that argued for pro-slavery. It didn't cross only on geographical terms. And this, again, is somebody that doesn't know their history. To accomplish this adaptation, racism first needs to be reduced to simple, isolated, and extreme acts of prejudice. No, because that's what racism was. These acts must be intentional, malicious, and based on conscious dislike of someone because of race. Yes, it has to be based upon dislike because of someone's race. If a murderer goes out and kills a black person, but he did it because that was just the person that was there, that doesn't make him a racist. It makes him a murderer. You can kill somebody of another race without being a racist. But if you intentionally went out to kill a black person and found a black person and said, I'm killing this black person, that would make you a racist on top of being a murderer. But if you killed a black person, but had no intention of killing a black person, just was killing anybody, and it just so happened to be a black person, that would make you a non-racist murderer. So in her mindset and her definitions here, it's just totally ridiculous. Racists were those white people in the South, smiling and picnicking at the base of lynching trees. Yeah, that's right. Everybody just smiled at lynchings. Store owners posting white-only signs over drinking fountains. And good old boys beating innocent children, such as Emmett Till, to death. In other words, racists were mean, ignorant, old, uneducated Southern whites. Again, her narrative is incorrect, but the idea is, yes, that somebody has to be malicious and wanting to hurt the person because of the color of their skin or their race, if you're doing religion, or their sexuality. That has to be the reason. So if you're calling somebody a name based upon why they're doing what they're doing, yes, the intent has to be there. Nice people, well-intended people, open-minded middle-class people, people raised in the enlightened North, could not be racist. Also untrue. If you believe that African Americans can succeed because they don't have the capacity, that's a racist ideology. If you believe that they're not equal in their capabilities, that's a racist ideology. If you don't believe that there are African Americans that aren't succeeding because they aren't trying, that's not racist. I've worked with many who have given up on themselves, suffer from learned helplessness, and just don't do. Not because they're incapable, but they're making a choice not to, for a whole variety of reasons. Now, the issue is, what do you do about that? That's a separate question. But the nature here of her argument here is just totally based upon non-historical, non-factual things. Racist equal bad, ignorant, bigoted, prejudiced, mean-spirited, old, and Southern. Non-racist equals good, progressive, educated, open-minded, well-intentioned, young, and Northerner. And I absolutely disagree with both her mindsets on both these things. You could be ignorant, bigoted, prejudiced, and mean-spirited, and be young and from the North, and you could be progressive, educated, open-minded, well-intentioned, and be old and in the South. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and she's just putting them together. Again, her own version of racism. While making racism bad seems like a positive change, we have to look at how this functions in practice. Well, it is positive change that we see racism as being bad. That is absolutely... Otherwise, we're going back to the idea of the Southerners who fought for slavery and stating it was a cornerstone, that the nature of slavery is a good thing and that basically whites are superior. And I think that argument is inherently racist, and anybody who makes that argument is racist. Within this paradigm, to suggest that I am racist is to deliver a deep moral blow. We've already established that the people, white supremacists, would consider that a moral blow, which too bad that they recognize it more than she recognizes it. I must defend my character, and that is where all my energy will go. Yes, when you attack people's character and say things bad about them, as I call her an anti-Semite and Nazi, based upon her definition that she would use, she is an anti-Semite and Nazi because she does nothing in this book to denounce anti-Semitism nor Nazis. So because of that, she's complacent about that and therefore a Nazi and anti-Semite. Having received this blow, I must defend the character, and that is where my energy will go, to deflecting the charge rather than reflecting on my behavior. In this way, the good-bad binary makes it nearly impossible to talk to white people about racism. What is it? How it shapes all of us, and the inevitable ways that we are conditioned to participate in it. If we cannot discuss these dynamics and see ourselves within them, we cannot stop participating in racism. The good-bad binary made it effectively impossible for the average white person to understand, much less interpret, racism. No. I think it would be very easy to interpret something if you can show it and where it is. The only problem is that she just presumes everything and doesn't show. What she does is say there's inherently differences. So if there are inherent differences, therefore then it's problematic, racism. That doesn't say that. There are differences in white communities. Russians have much more millionaires and much more wealth than English in the United States. Racism against the English, because Russian white people are more successful than English white people, across the board. This is in the book, The Millionaire Next Door. It quotes these statistics about different white communities and where they stand on the economic ladder. And they're not equal to each other. So this idea that there's this white out there and white is the same is nonsense. It's like saying all 20-year-olds are this, all 30-year-olds are this. If you take a look at 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, you see discrepancies. Every single group's going to have discrepancies. As African-American scholar and filmmaker, again, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, but Amawala Akitondi says, racism is a systematic, social, institutional, omnipresent, and epistemological, embedded phenomenon that pervades every vestige of our reality. For most whites, however, racism is like murder. The concept exists, but someone has committed it in order for it to happen. This limited view of such a multi-layered system cultivates the sinister nature of racism, and in fact perpetuates racist phenomenon rather than eradicates them. So, if this was the case, how is it that the top groups in the United States are Nigerians and Indian, all immigrants, non-white? How are they doing so well if there's systematic racism against color of skin? Because that goes against the narrative, and there's no answer in this book about that. It doesn't address it. Why is it that you can't call them African because you're getting upset, but people from Haiti and Jamaica do not get arrested at the same rate? In fact, much, much lower. Why is that? Because if it's just a matter of skin color, you would find that they go across the board. I mean, could a cop pick out a Haitian as opposed to somebody who's from African American from years ago, from history, from slavery? Can they tell the difference by they driving by in a car? So why is there discrepancies there? But this book doesn't go into any of that. There's no look at this from a social psychology point of view to break down and actually look at this in any multivariate way. This is the most childlike way of looking at a problem and just broad brushing it and saying, racism, and just call it that and say, wow, if you don't believe it, you're racist. The good-bad frame is a false dichotomy. All people hold prejudices, especially across racial lines, in a society deeply divided by race. I don't even agree with that statement. I don't think that all people believe that there's inherent racist differences in that. I think people believe there are cultural differences, where you grew up, how you are, but not racial differences. I don't believe that Africans are inferior to me in any way. I don't believe I'm superior to African Americans in any way. I don't think I'm superior to people from Afghanistan in any way. I think that where I grew up, where they grew up, how we were raised, our ideas about what we were exposed to, create this idea. When I work with people, I try to give them a different way of seeing things, hoping they'll make different choices so that they'll make their lives better. If I thought it was inherently an incapability, then why am I wasting my time? This book doesn't take into account any sort of objective looking at things. I can be told that everyone is equal but my parents, and I can have friends of color, and I may tell racist jokes, yet I am still affected by the forces of racism as a member of society in which racism is the bedrock. Well, I agree. I think that she is one of the most racist people I've ever met. well, not meet, but read about in terms of her book, I would put her up there with Mein Kampf, because the way that she talks about people is the same way in which Hitler defined what a German was and an Aryan was and how they saw things. Hitler saw white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired people as superior, the Aryan race, even though he himself was not blue-eyed or blonde-haired. But that, again, Hitler didn't care about facts either. He just cared about the narrative. And the idea was they were superior, the superior man. And guess what? When you tell people that, they start believing it. They raise the self-esteem of Germany, who after World War I and the defeat, it gave them a sense of, wow, something to belong to. And once you start doing that, you can pull people to do a lot of really disgusting things. This is why this ideology is so scary to me. I will still be seen as white, treated as white, and experience life as a white person. My identity, personality, interest, and investments will develop from a white perspective. I will have a white worldview and a white frame of reference in a society which race clearly matters. Our race profoundly shapes us. Well, if she's right about this, then how dare she write this book? Her book then just invalidated itself. She's a white person that can't get out of her white thought process. How in the world is she writing this? She's stuck being a racist, according to what she just wrote. So if you believe what she's saying and you're going, wow, what a great book that I'm reading, then the person that wrote this book just invalidated their own thought process and saying that they're a racist that can't get out of it because they're stuck being a racist no matter what they do. If we want to challenge this construct, we must make an honest accounting of how it manifests in our own lives and in the society around us. Well, considering it's invisible, you can't do that. And what are you basing it upon? You see, the problem is, again, you're calling it this invisible type of thing that you can't see, that you can't touch, that you can't really see. You're just looking at the outcomes and then presuming what's going on. But you're not telling us the mechanism. How is it happening? That you don't go through. It's just that it's there because there are discrepancies. Even though that there's a predominant race that is the majority of the nation, which in every nation the majority is, they are the heads of almost everything because they are a majority. That's just the nature of every single place you go. Although individual racist acts do occur, yay, we agree. These acts are a part of a larger system of interlocking dynamics. We don't agree. I think that there is a aspect of, it was, and historically there was, but today, for the most part, you will find that there are individual racists, and you'll see this. When George Floyd, when the narrative came out, the entire country, right, it didn't make a difference where you were on. There was nobody defending what the police did. Now, when the facts came out, that's a separate story. But the original narrative, if it was true, that narrative was true, there was nobody defending. Nobody went, oh, well, that's a black person. We don't really care. It was horrific. We were horrified. And everybody felt like they wanted to fix it. The feeling of the nation was, this needed to be fixed. We can't have this. That tells you where we're at. The fact that we feel that way. The focus on individual instances masks the personal, interpersonal, cultural, historical, and structural analysis that is necessary to challenge this larger system. The simplistic idea that racism is limited to the individual, intentional acts committed by unkind people is at the root of virtually all white defensiveness on this topic. To move beyond defensiveness, we have to let go of this common belief. No, what you're trying to do is change the definition and then make people feel like they're part of that. But that doesn't change it just because you'd like to change it. The nature of saying to everybody else that they are racist because they live in a system that is capitalistic and based upon a scientific method is irrational. And that's what you say in this book. The scientific method, racist. No, scientific method is good. Used by African Americans. Although individual racists the good, the bad binary certainly obscures the structural nature of racism and makes it difficult for us to see or understand. Equally problematic is the impact of such a worldview on our actions. If a white person, I conceptualize racism as a binary, I place myself on the non-racist side with further actions required of me. No action is required of me because I'm not a racist. And yes, that would be true. If you're not doing anything to be racist towards anybody else, you're not required to do a further action. If you'd like to, you can. You could fight against forms of racism, look for them and stamp them out. The same way, I am not pro-HIV. I do not walk around promoting HIV. But I don't go and try to stop any place HIV takes place. I don't go, okay, stop. I got to see who's having sex with whom. I have to stop this. No drug needles. I'm going to give you another needle. Stopping this. I'm not an advocate for stopping HIV. If I come across somebody, I try to educate them about that, and hopefully they won't do that to themselves. But that's where my locus of control stops. The problem here is she's making a locus of control for people that they can't control. So they're only going to become more agitated and angry because you can't control the dynamics that she's trying to create. It doesn't concern me, and there's nothing further I need to do. This worldview guarantees that I will not build my skills in thinking critically about racism or use my position to challenge racial inequality. I don't agree with either of that. If I see racial inequality or I see an action, I will challenge it. So, no. And by the way, not only me, people have been challenging it since the Constitutional Convention. Racism has been challenged in the inception of this country. The good-bad binary is a play at virtually every day in my work as I consult on issues of racial justice. My job is to help individuals and organizations see how racism is manifesting itself in the practices and outcomes. I am typically received well when speaking in general terms. For example, your requirement that applicants have an advanced degree that an equivalent experience is automatically disqualifying some of the applicants that could bring the perspective and experience you say you're looking for. Yet, when I point out a concrete moment in the room in which someone's racism is manifesting itself, white fragility erupts. For example, I was working with a group of educators who had been meeting regularly for at least 8 sessions. The group was composed of the equity teams from a public school system, self-selected by people who wanted to support equity efforts in their school. I had just finished an hour-long presentation titled Seeing the Water, Whiteness in Daily Life. Before I get through, I have a problem. I believe in equality, not equity. Equality is the idea that everybody has an equal chance at something. Equity believes that everything should be ending up equal. I don't believe that's possible. If you understand about economics and money, it never happened in any society ever. If you understand about ability, we're not all equally abled. We're not all the same intelligence. We're not all the same skill level. Me and Michael Jordan are not equal on the basketball court. And by the way, I am quite inferior to him there. Very inferior. But that inferiority doesn't necessitate that I can't do something else. But the ability that he has is much greater. So this idea of equity, we don't believe actually. It's a lie. Because I don't see anybody trying to get the NBA to be equity. It's only in places where they want to have arguments about that. Also, I don't see them wanting equity when it comes to, working in jobs of low labor. Like I don't see anybody saying they're not an equity number of waiters because that's not a job they care about. This presentation is designed to make visible the relentless messages of white superiority and the resulting and inevitable internalization of the messages for white people. The room appeared to be with me, open and receptive with many nodding along in agreement. Then a white teacher raised her hand and told a story of an interaction she had and she drove alongside a group of parents protesting the achievement gap in her school. She then proceeded to imitate one mother in particular who offended her. "You don't understand our children," this mother had called out as she drove by. But the stereotypical way that the white teacher imitated the mother, we all knew the mother was black. The room seemed to collectively hold its breath at her imitation, which was bordering on racial mockery. Well, the teacher's concluding point was that, on reflection, she came to realize that the mother was right, and she didn't really understand the children of color. The emotional thrust of a story was a umbrage at the mother for making this assumption. For the room, the emotional impact was on the stereotypical imitation of the angry black woman. As the story comes to a close, I had a decision to make. Should I act with integrity and point out what was racially problematic about the story? After all, making racism visible was literally what I had been hired to do. Further, several African American teachers in the room had certainly noticed the reinforcement of racist stereotypes. To not intervene would be yet another white person choosing to protect white feelings rather than interpret racism. A white person who billed herself as a racial justice consultant, no less. Yet I'll be taking the risk of losing the group given the likelihood that the woman would become defensive, shut down, and the room would split into those who thought I was mistreated her and those who didn't. I decided what would retain my moral and professional integrity and serve as a model for other white people. As diplomatically as possible, I said, I understand that you gained valuable insight from the interaction. I thank you for sharing that insight with us. And I'm going to ask you to consider not telling that story in that way again. Now, what's interesting about this is that she's interpreting that language and that as a derogatory. And I'm wondering why that is. Example, if you watch Saturday Night Live, and the President of the United States has this particular way of talking, and when he gets up there and they talk like Donald Trump does, or when Barack Obama was president on Saturday Night Live, and they talked in his cadence, and he had a specific cadence when he spoke, and they mimicked it, was because Barack Obama, or because they mimicked what they heard, is that racist in its intent? Somebody talks in an accent to you and you're retelling the story, and you're retelling the story with the same accent that you heard. Does that inherently make it racist? Again, maybe it might be insensitive. I don't know, but I don't think it's a racist idea. The idea is she's repeating what she heard. If she upplayed it or created something that wasn't said to her, or tried to repeat something that was said to her and was playing down to something, maybe, but that's not what it sounds like happened here. She's telling an actual story, and she's telling you like the person said it. As when you tell a story about being mugged, or you tell a story about a friend and a story that takes place, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and something happens, sometimes you mimic the way that they say something to you because it helps you remember the story, and it gives it the emotional content that it had. But not necessarily is that putting the person down or mimic them in a way to try to make fun of them, because the intent matters here. But again, nope, you can't do that either now. When she immediately began to protest, I interrupted her to continue. I'm offering you a teachable moment, I said. I'm only asking that you try to listen with openness. I then laid out what was racially problematic about how she told the story and offered her a way to share her learning without reinforcing racist stereotypes. Again, it depends. Was it a racist stereotype or what happened in the story? For the same story could easily have been told with the same conclusion drawn without the racially charged imitation of the mother. Well, yes, but the flavor of the story is not going to be there. And the nature of the story would not be the same. Because the manner in which you describe the story tells you a lot about it. And by the way, the same thing I think would have happened if it was some poor white person from the South who had a very thick accent, a Southern accent, and you were telling the story, and you would say it like the Southern white person would say. There are many comedians that have done this in explaining things. And there are many comedians that have explained this based upon their friends and the way that they talk. But again, this is now being interpreted as something racist, as opposed to telling a story about actually what happened. She defensively interrupted me several times and eventually appeared to be listening. Shortly after the intervention, we took a break. Several African American teachers came up to thank me, as did one white teacher who found my intervention refreshing and much needed example of how to break with white solidarity. So when black comedians, or Eddie Murphy talked about white people on that, and he dressed in white makeup and acted like a white person and sat up tight and was talking like that way and was trying to imitate white people, was that racist? Several white people also approached me to let me know how upset the teacher was that she was quitting the group. Thus is the power of the good-bad binary and how it informs white fragility. Even a white person on the equity team participating in a class based on the premise that racism is an instruction in our society and that white complacency is an inevitable result could not handle the feedback on how her racism was unintentionally manifesting itself. Did she see this person as less than because of it? Was she making the idea that the person was uneducated? Again, I don't know what the intent was. But again, when somebody tells a story and they're repeating something that they've heard, I don't think it's inherently racist if they're telling you what they heard. If you're a white and haven't been challenged to look at your own racism, perhaps you told a problematic joke or made a prejudiced assumption as someone brought to your attention. It is common to feel defensive. I would say that the racial jokes I've heard many times, I happen to like comedy. I like going to comedy clubs. It's one of my favorite things to do, by the way. And I enjoy it a lot. And guess what? They tell jokes there all the time. Off-color, racist, sexist. It happens. Is it funny? Yes. And sometimes they make fun of me. I like to sit in the front sometimes. You know, the splash section you have at the when you go to the water to aquariums, and then the whale jumps, and then you're in the splash zone. Well, in comedy clubs, you have where they made fun of zone, and I've gotten made fun of by comedians many, many times, and I laugh along, and it's funny, because that's what it's there for. It's not demeaning, it's not hurtful, and it's not designed to be putting somebody down. Again, the nature of what's being done is not being looked at here. Was she mocking the person? Or was she telling the story because that's what she remembered and she was saying it like she remembered it? Again, it's very different. It's common to become defensive. If you believe you're being told you're a bad person, all the energy is likely to be going toward denying the possibility and invalidating the message rather than trying to understand why what you've said is done as hurtful. And by the way, if it did hurt somebody or she hurt the woman, then yes, you would owe her an apology. Absolutely. But just because you hurt somebody doesn't make you racist. That's the case. There are many racist people that hurt me. I've had many African American clients say really mean and horrible things to me. Sometimes even racial. Especially when they find out their urine is not negative and they've got caught on a tox or some situation. I've gotten some really bad things said to me in anger. It doesn't make them racist. You will probably respond with white fragility. But unfortunately, white fragility can only protect the problematic behavior you feel so defensive about. It does not demonstrate that you are an open person who has no problematic racial behavior. The dominant paradigm of race as discrete, individual, intentional, and malicious acts make it unlikely that whites will acknowledge any of the actions of racism. For example, I often read about a government official, a teacher, or another public servant expressing shockingly racist statements and still insisting that he or she is not a racist. Readers may recall a West Virginia county employee, Pamela Ramsey Taylor, who held a high-level position as Director of County Development, and she was suspended after posting racist remarks about First Lady Michelle Obama on Facebook. It would be so refreshing to have a classy, beautiful, dignified First Lady back in the White House. I'm tired of seeing a sick ape in heels. And by the way, I would agree, it's 100% racist. And the statement of it is racist. Now, it's very interesting. I had a client recently who was telling me that they call people in their office when they do something wrong monkeys. Now, these people are white, by the way. And I said to this person, I said, you have to be very, very careful. You recognize that if anybody else of color were to come in and you say that to them, they're going to automatically assume you're racist. And the person was shocked and didn't even think of that as the issue. And he's so stuck in his white ideology in terms of being who he is in terms of that, he doesn't think about the ramification of that. By the way, does that mean, and again, the statement of it sounds incredibly racist, but let's supposing for a minute she would have said the same thing about Melania Trump and then called her an ape. Would you say she was racist? Or would you say that she doesn't like her for whatever other reason? So the nature is, I don't know if, and this is where it gets very tricky, because if she's using the term to denote that because of her skin color, then yes, that would be a racist statement and racist act. But if she would have done that to a white person and it just came out that she was wrong to do it, then it wouldn't be racist. It's just that it will look that way. It's the idea of, you get into a fight with somebody and you beat them up, and then you find that afterwards they're a homosexual, and now you're putting for a hate crime for being, anti-gay. But you didn't know beforehand. but it didn't make a difference. They're putting it anyway because it looks that way. So again, I don't know whether or not that was her intent. I don't know her history. I don't know who she is. But it does sound like a racist statement for sure, and definitely opens up the door for it. Does it mean it is? No. But again, we don't believe in innocent until proven guilty. We believe in guilty until proven innocent in this book. The mayor of the city responded, "Just made my day, Pam." Taylor's response to the ensuing uproar was, "My comments were not intended to be racist at all. I was referring to my day being made for change in the White House. I am truly sorry for any hard feelings this may have caused. Those who know me know that I'm not in any way racist." Although Taylor was suspended, but eventually got back her job. I'm left wondering what actually qualifies as racism in the white mind. Well, again, it would qualify based upon what you just said. Like I said, when that NBA player said to, I forgot his name right now, but it was just in the news, and he said to him something, white something, and he called him a slang, a term, and he identified the skin color as white. And he said, wait, that was not my intent. It happens because the nature is you identify by what you see. That doesn't necessitate that you're racist. It is a racist statement, but a racist statement doesn't make you a racist. People say things without it being the intent or the mindset. And I think, again, there's no delineation here. It's that if you've ever said anything, you're by definition a racist. That's not how it works. It's like the dang dog, and you start yelling at the dog, and you start making bad words at the dog because you're angry at the dog, doesn't make you a dog hater. If the cat does something to scratch it and you start cursing the cat and yelling at the cat, doesn't make you a cat hater. How many people say horrible things to their wife? Does that mean they hate their wife and they wish they're racist against, they're sexist against their wife? Calling them horrible names? Or people that yell at their children? So the intent matters, but again, there's no aspect of allowing that in this place. When I talk to white people about racism, I hear the same claims rooted in the good-bad binary, made again and again. I organize these claims in two overall categories, both which labeled the person as good and therefore not racist, and the first claim, colorblindness. I don't see color and or race. It has no meaning for me. Therefore, I'm free of racism. The second set claims to have value diversity. I know people of color, and I've been near people of color, and I've generally found regard of people of color. Therefore, I'm free of racism. Both categories fundamentally rest on good-bad binary. Although I can organize these narratives into two overall categories, they can be often used interchangeably. They don't need to make sense. They just need to position the speaker as a good person, free of racism, and the end of discussion. Colorblind statements insist that people don't see race, or they do see it as no meaning to them. Colorblind claims include the following. I was taught to treat everyone the same. Okay, so you want to treat everybody not the same. I don't see color, so you want everybody to see color. I don't care if you're pink, purple, or polka dot, so I do care if you're pink, purple, or polka dot. You realize I'm taking the negatives of each one. Race doesn't have any meaning to me. Opposite of that, race has lots of meaning to me. My parents weren't racist, though that is why I'm not racist. Well, my parents were racist. That's why I am racist. Do you see the problem with what's going on here? Everyone struggles, but if you work hard, you shouldn't struggle and you shouldn't work hard. By the way, that's what just came out from the African American Smithsonian Institute when they came out and was saying that hard work was a white thing. That was really beautiful, by the way. So-and-so just happens to be black, but has nothing to do with what I am about to tell you. Now, I'm about to tell you something about him, and it has everything to do with him being black. Focusing on race is what divides us. If we not focused on race, it would unite us. If people are respectful to me, I'm respectful to them, regardless of race. If people are respectful to me, I am not respectful to them. I only judge it based upon race. Children today are so much more open. Children today should be so much more closed. I'm not racist. I'm from Canada. I'm not sure why that's the case, but I'm racist. I'm from Canada. I was picked on because I was white when I grew up in poor, so I don't have race privilege. By the way, I would agree with that 1,000,000%. I was not picked on because I was white. And I grew up in a rich neighborhood. So I have a lot of white privilege. Which, by the way, is how she defines white privilege in this book, based upon where they are in society and all those things she quoted earlier. So her statement about saying this stuff is in contradiction to how she defined why white people have privilege to begin with. The second set I term color celibate. This claims the set that the person seems to embrace racial differences. Color celebrate claims include statements of these. I work in a very diverse environment. So I don't want to work in a very diverse environment. I have people of color in my family. I married a person of color and I have children of color. I would never marry anybody of color. I don't want anybody in my family of color. And I would never have a child of color. I mean, if you take a look at the opposites of all these, yeah, I think I like these statements much better than the opposites. I was in the military. I was never in the military. I used to live in New York or Hawaii. I wish she would have. We don't like how white our neighborhood is, but we had to move here for the schools. Now, again, I think the aspect is I would have liked to have had diversity, but the school system was important. I was in the Peace Corps. Never go to the Peace Corps. I marched in the 60s. Nah, you shouldn't have cared about anybody else, by the way, because you said earlier on that you're supposed to be an advocate and do something. But no, not in the 60s, though. We adopted a child from China. No, don't adopt anybody else except from your own race. Stick to your own kind. Our grandchildren are multiracial. Nope. You should never have any multiracial anything. We should only be segregated. I was on a mission in Africa. Stay away from them. You should only stick to your own. I went to a very diverse school, lived in a very diverse neighborhood. Nah, diversity is nothing. You shouldn't care about that. I lived in Japan where I was a minority, so I know what it's like to be in a minority. No, you should never live as a minority, only live as the majority. I lived among fill-in-the-blank people, so I'm actually a person of color. Well, I don't know about that one, but there seems to be a number of white women specifically who have come out and think that they're people of color, and it turns out that people don't like that. My great-grandmother was a Native American princess. I don't understand what her mindset is here. That somehow these things are not good, but the opposites of these things are very, very bad. I'm going to stop here at this point. We'll continue on page 78 when she's going to try to unravel these claims that she made. And we'll take that up hopefully tomorrow. So again, we are now on chapter 5, page 78 of this book. And again, I hope you'll understand what it means when you take the opposite of something and what that turns into. Between what she pointed out and the opposites, I'll take what's there. I think that's a much better thing to strive for than the opposites. But if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. If you think I'm wrong about anything I said, please leave a comment below. If you like this video, hit like. If you disliked it, tell me why. I'd love to hear it. And again, if you have not subscribed, please do and share this video. And if you'd like to become a patron to this channel, hit the Subcribe-star link below. I wish you have a good night and good mental health.